AITA for refusing to host Thanksgiving because my family keeps using my house as a free hotel. Let me just start by saying I used to love Thanksgiving. It was my favorite holiday. No gifts, no pressure, just good food, good company, and the cozy warmth of home. Growing up, my mom always made it feel so special. She'd wake up at the crack of dawn to start cooking. The house would smell like roasted turkey and cinnamon, and the day felt magical. I wanted to recreate that for my own family, and for the first few years of hosting, I genuinely loved it. But now I can't even think about Thanksgiving without my stomach twisting into knots. Here's the thing, for the past 5 years, I've been the one hosting Thanksgiving. I didn't plan for it to become a permanent arrangement, it just kind of happened. The first year, my mom's oven broke less than a week before Thanksgiving. It was a disaster. She was panicking about how she'd cook everything, and honestly, I felt bad for her. My husband and I had just finished renovating our kitchen that year. It was spacious, with shiny new appliances that were practically begging to be used, so I offered to host. It seemed like the obvious solution at the time. I didn't mind. It felt good to step up, and honestly, I was excited to show off the kitchen. That first year went great, and everyone was so appreciative. They complimented the food, the decor, the cozy atmosphere. I remember thinking it was the best Thanksgiving I'd ever had. The next year, my sister called me in early October. She said, "So, about Thanksgiving, I don't think I can host. My apartment is just too small for everyone, and you know how cramped it gets." My brother chimed in a few days later, saying his house was too chaotic because his kids were toddlers at the time and hosting would just be too much. My mom, of course, was already looking at me. "Your house worked so well last year," she said with that tone, the one that was both a compliment and a nudge. "Would you mind?" I didn't mind, at least not then. I liked hosting, and I figured, why not? My kitchen was still new and exciting, and I thought, what's one more year? But by the third year, something had shifted. It wasn't a question anymore, it was just expected. There was no discussion, no coordination. Everyone just assumed Thanksgiving would be at my house. I realized this when, in mid-November, my sister sent a group text that said, "So, what time should we come over on Thursday?" My mom followed up with, "Let me know if you want me to bring anything," as if it was already decided. No one asked me if I was okay hosting again. No one considered whether I had the time, energy, or desire to take on the responsibility. It was just happening. Looking back, I can pinpoint that as the moment Thanksgiving stopped feeling like a holiday I hosted out of love and started feeling like a chore. It's not just the cooking or the cleaning, though those are monumental tasks on their own. It's the way my family treats my home like a free Airbnb. They don't just come for the meal, oh no, that would be too simple. My brother and his family show up days early. His kids treat my house like their personal playground. The moment they walk through the door, they're dumping their backpacks, pulling out toys, and scattering their stuff everywhere. My once tidy living room transforms into a war zone of action figures, crayons, snack crumbs, and somehow sticky handprints on every surface. I don't even know what they're eating half the time to make their hands so sticky. It's like they have an endless supply of jelly in their pockets. And my brother, he doesn't help. He sits back, watches the chaos, and shrugs it off like it's no big deal. One year, his kids broke a lamp in the living room. They were tossing a ball around indoors despite me specifically saying not to, and it went flying into the side table. Crash! Glass everywhere. Do you know what my brother said? "Well, kids are kids." That was it. No apology, no offer to replace the lamp, just a casual dismissal, like it was inevitable and I should have expected it. Meanwhile, my sister, she doesn't lift a finger. She arrives hours after she said she would, usually carrying nothing but a small bag and an attitude of complete entitlement. The moment she steps through the door, it's like she's checked into a 5-star resort. She drops her coat on the back of a chair, kicks off her shoes right in the middle of the hallway, and makes a beeline for the couch. Once she's settled in with her feet up, she pulls out her phone and starts scrolling or put on a random show that no one else is watching. It's as if she believes her mere presence is her contribution to the holiday. One year, I'd been in the kitchen since 7 a.m., juggling 3 side dishes, checking on the turkey, and keeping an eye on my brother's kids, who were tearing through the house like caffeinated squirrels. I asked her if she could chop some vegetables for the salad. She gave me the biggest sigh, rolled her eyes dramatically, and said, "Ugh, I'm just here to relax. You know how stressed I've been." Then she flopped back onto the couch as if I'd just asked her to run a marathon. I ended up doing it myself because the vegetables weren't going to chop themselves, but the resentment simmered all day. And my sister doesn't just avoid the work, she actively makes more for me. She leaves her empty wine glasses on every available surface, spills crumbs all over the couch, and has a magical ability to turn a spotless bathroom into a disaster zone in under 5 minutes. One year, she left makeup wipes, hair ties, and God knows what else strewn across the counter like it was her personal vanity. And of course, she doesn't clean any of it up before she leaves. When I point it out or ask for help, she waves me off with, "Relax, it's Thanksgiving." Relax, I don't even know what that means anymore. And then there's my mom, my dear, sweet, overbearing mom. She's the kind of woman who will tell you she's proud of you while simultaneously pointing out everything you're doing wrong. She doesn't mean to be cruel, at least. I don't think she does, but her critiques feel endless. One year, I had worked so hard on the turkey, basting it perfectly every half hour, making sure the skin was golden and crisp. Everyone said it was delicious, everyone except my mom. She said, "It's nice, but it's a little dry. You should really try my recipe next year, it's foolproof." Another year, she spent a full 10 minutes inspecting the tablecloth. Finally, she said, "Are you planning to iron this? It's embarrassing to eat on wrinkles." I had just finished setting the table, and I had to take everything off to iron the damn thing because I couldn't handle the judgmental glances she kept shooting me. She has an opinion about everything, the way I arrange the furniture. "You should really angle the couch more, it's awkward to sit like this, the way I fold the napkins. This is fine, but it would be much more elegant if you did it the way I do." One year, she even complained about the temperature of the house. It was November, and she said, "It's a bit chilly in here. Don't you think it would be more comfortable if you turned up the heat?" I suggested she grab a sweater, and she looked at me like I'd insulted her ancestors. "Well," she said, "a good hostess would make sure her guests are comfortable." Last year, her comment that truly made me want to scream came during dinner. I'd been up since the crack of dawn cooking for a dozen people, and by some miracle, everything came out hot, delicious, and on time. I sat down at the table, finally ready to enjoy the meal, and she turned to me and said, "You're such a good hostess, but a great hostess would make sure the butter is softened before serving." I had been holding it together all day, but that nearly broke me. I plastered on a smile, but inside I was seething. But last year was the breaking point. After days of shopping, prepping, cooking, and cleaning, my husband and I collapsed into bed after everyone finally left. I thought I'd earned a moment of peace, but the next morning, I walked into the kitchen and found chaos. My brother's kids had raided the fridge and eaten the leftover pie I'd specifically saved for my in-laws, leaving nothing but crumbs. I stood there in disbelief, staring at the empty pie tin. When I told my brother, expecting at least an apology, he shrugged and said, "They're kids. What do you expect? No apology, no offer to replace it, just complete indifference." Meanwhile, my mom was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. She looked up and said, "Can you make me some coffee? I didn't sleep well last night." I was standing in the middle of the disaster zone that was my kitchen, pots and pans everywhere, counters smeared with gravy, sticky floors from spilled cranberry sauce, and she wanted coffee. My sister, of course, was lounging on the couch in the living room, watching some Hallmark movie, completely oblivious. My husband and I spent the next 2 hours cleaning up while everyone else relaxed. When I finally said something about how no one had helped, my sister rolled her eyes and said, "Well, you're the one who wanted to host." That was it. That was the moment I snapped. I decided right then and there that I was done. I was exhausted physically, mentally, emotionally, and I knew I couldn't do it again. Hosting had stopped being something I loved and had turned into something I dreaded. It wasn't even about the cooking or the cleaning anymore. It was the entitlement, the lack of respect for my time and my home, and the way my family had started treating my efforts as something they were owed rather than something I was offering out of love. This year, I told myself, things were going to be different. I wasn't hosting, period. Back in September, I brought it up. I gave everyone plenty of notice because I thought naively that if I explained how I felt, they'd understand. I suggested we rotate hosting duties, or, if no one wanted to take it on, we could do something different this year, like going out to a restaurant. It felt like a fair compromise, but the moment the words left my mouth, the backlash started. My mom was the first to speak up, and of course, she made it personal. Selfish, she called me. Your house is the most comfortable, she said, as though that alone made it my permanent responsibility. I tried to explain that I needed a break, that hosting had become overwhelming for me, but she brushed it off, saying, "It's just one day. You're overthinking it." Then came my sister, who flat out refused to even consider the idea of hosting. "My apartment is way too small for everyone," she said, as though she hadn't spent the last 5 years sprawled across my couch without a care in the world. She didn't offer to help find another solution, or even take on a smaller part of the workload. Just a hard no. My brother wasn't any better. He claimed he was too busy with work, saying, "I just don't have the time to take on something like that right now." I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. Did they think I had endless time, that my life was somehow less busy, less demanding than theirs? Still, I stood my ground. I told them I wasn't hosting this year, and if no one else wanted to step up, we could skip Thanksgiving altogether or keep it small. I tried to be firm but fair, thinking that if I set clear boundaries, they'd respect them. But I underestimated how far they'd go to make me feel guilty. Since then, the guilt trips have been relentless. My mom has perfected the art of the passive-aggressive text, sending me messages like, "Thanksgiving just won't be the same without you, and it's sad to think about breaking a family tradition like this." Every time my phone buzzes, I brace myself, knowing it's probably another thinly veiled attempt to manipulate me. My brother, who swore up and down last year that he'd help more, has suddenly found his voice again, promising again to pitch in this year if I change my mind. I've heard it all before. His version of helping is throwing together a last-minute side dish and disappearing to watch football while I do the heavy lifting. And then there's my sister. She's taken a different approach, opting for sarcasm and snide comments in the family group chat. "I guess we're just canceling Thanksgiving this year since no one cares enough to host," she wrote last week, clearly aimed at me. "Another time," she said, "maybe we should just all order pizza and call it a day." Every time she says something like that, I feel the weight of her words pressing down on me. It's like she's daring me to feel bad, daring me to cave, daring me to take on the responsibility again so she doesn't have to lift a finger. Now, with Thanksgiving literally a day away, the group chat is a dumpster fire of passive aggression and pointed remarks. No one has stepped up to host. No one has even seriously offered to come up with an alternative plan. My mom keeps hinting that Thanksgiving might not happen at all, which makes me feel awful. I hate the idea of ruining the holiday, even though I know, deep down, that it's not my fault. It's not my job to fix everything, but the guilt is still there, gnawing at me. It's hard not to feel like the villain when everyone's disappointment is so palpable. And yet, at the same time, I'm so tired. I'm tired of being the one who sacrifices her time, her energy, and her sanity while everyone else sits back and takes it for granted. Why is it automatically my responsibility? Why can't anyone else step up, even just once? It's like they've decided that hosting is my job, and the idea of someone else taking on even a fraction of the work is completely out of the question. I don't understand how they can be so blind to how much they're asking of me or how little they're willing to give in return. Part of me is tempted to cave. I keep thinking, maybe I should just suck it up and host to keep the peace, but another part of me knows that's exactly what they're counting on. They're hoping I'll feel guilty and give in, just like I have every other year. And honestly, I'm done. I'm tired of sacrificing my time, energy, and sanity while everyone else treats me like the family maid. I deserve a break too, don't I? So, here I am, sitting in my quiet, pie-free kitchen, wondering if I'm the asshole for standing my ground. Should I cave and host Thanksgiving, or do I have the right to put my foot down and say enough is enough? Update. The days leading up to Thanksgiving were tense. Every few days, another message would pop up in the family group chat, pressuring me to host. My mom kept sending little guilt-laden notes like, "I just can't imagine Thanksgiving without your beautiful home," or, "You've always made the holiday so special for all of us." My sister doubled down on the sarcasm, sending memes about canceled holidays and hostless Thanksgivings. My brother, predictably, stayed in the background, occasionally chiming in with, "I'll help this year, I promise," which only made me roll my eyes because we all knew how that promise had played out in the past. As the date got closer, the tone of the messages changed. It wasn't just guilt anymore, it was desperation. My mom wrote, "It's just sad to think about not all being together this year. I've been telling everyone at church how excited I am to see the family, and now I don't even know if it'll happen." My sister threw in a jab, writing, "Guess I'll just heat up a frozen turkey dinner. What a festive Thanksgiving this will be." Even my brother's wife, who rarely gets involved, sent me a private message saying, "The kids have been looking forward to Thanksgiving at your house. They love it there." I held firm for as long as I could. I told myself that this was their problem, not mine. But the guilt started creeping in, especially when my mom called me and said, in her saddest voice, "I don't even know what we'll do if we don't get together this year. It just won't feel right." I was frustrated, angry even, but I also couldn't shake the image of my family scattered and disappointed on Thanksgiving Day. It wasn't fair that it always fell on me, but I also didn't want to be the reason the holiday didn't happen. So, against my better judgment, I agreed to host. But this time, I had a plan. If they wanted Thanksgiving at my house, they were going to have to work for it. I told everyone to come earlier than usual, claiming it was for a surprise. My mom seemed thrilled, thinking I'd planned something special. My sister texted, "What kind of surprise? Are we doing something fun?" My brother just replied with a thumbs-up emoji, which was typical. When Thanksgiving Day arrived, I woke up early, but this time, I didn't feel that familiar pit of stress in my stomach. I wasn't rushing around the kitchen or double-checking my to-do list. Instead, I poured myself a cup of coffee and sank into the quiet stillness of the morning. The kitchen was untouched, the countertops bare, the stove cold, the fridge still packed with all the raw ingredients I'd bought earlier in the week. The dining room looked just as it had the night before. No centerpiece, no fancy table settings, just an empty table waiting for its purpose. It was a stark contrast to the chaotic mornings of Thanksgivings past, where the house would already smell like roasting turkey and simmering gravy by now. But this year, I had decided to take a different approach. I sipped my coffee slowly, letting the calm before the storm sink in. My mom was the first to arrive, right on schedule, just as I knew she would be. She walked into the kitchen with her usual air of authority, expecting to find me in full prep mode, flustered and surrounded by half-finished dishes. Instead, she stopped in her tracks, looking around in confusion. "What's the surprise?" she asked, glancing at the empty counters and the bare dining table. I smiled, taking another sip of coffee, and told her it was coming soon. Her brows furrowed, and she lingered in the kitchen for a moment, clearly trying to figure out what I was up to. I could see her eyeing the fridge as if the surprise might be hiding in there. When she didn't get an answer, she wandered into the living room, probably to stake out her usual spot on the couch. Not long after, my brother arrived with his family. His kids burst through the door like little tornadoes, their shoes kicked off in different directions as they bolted toward the living room. One of them yelled something about playing a game on my TV, and before I could even respond, they were climbing onto the couch and rummaging through the snack bowl I'd intentionally left empty. My brother came in behind them, holding a box of store-bought cookies and looking around with the same puzzled expression my mom had worn. "Hey, what's going on?" he asked, glancing at the quiet kitchen. I shrugged nonchalantly, telling him the surprise would be revealed soon. He gave me a half-smile, clearly unsure of what to make of my calm demeanor, but he didn't press me further. Finally, my sister showed up, fashionably late as usual. She stepped inside with her typical air of annoyance, clearly irritated about being asked to come earlier than usual. She dropped her bag on the floor and flopped onto the couch, pulling out her phone and scrolling like she hadn't a care in the world. After a few minutes, she looked up and wrinkled her nose. "Why doesn't it smell like anything?" she asked, waving her hand dramatically. "Aren't you cooking yet?" Her tone was equal parts confusion and entitlement, as if the very idea of a silent kitchen offended her. I just smiled and told her not to worry about it. When everyone was finally there, I stood in the middle of the kitchen and dropped the bombshell. I handed out tasks as though I were the manager of a bustling restaurant. My mom was assigned to peel potatoes and prep the stuffing, a role she couldn't argue with, given her self-proclaimed expertise in doing things the right way. My brother, much to his dismay, was put in charge of the turkey. His wife, who usually managed to stay out of the fray, was tasked with making a pie from scratch, a job that clearly surprised her. Even the kids didn't escape my plan. I handed them napkins, plates, and utensils and told them to set the table. Their protests were met with a firm smile, and they reluctantly shuffled off to the dining room. Predictably, the loudest resistance came from my sister. She looked at me like I'd grown a second head when I handed her a cutting board and a pile of vegetables to chop. "I didn't come here to work," she announced, folding her arms like a petulant teenager. She repeated it several times, as though saying it enough would make it true. But I stood firm. I told her that if she wanted to eat, she'd have to contribute. For a moment, I thought she might actually leave. She put her phone down and stood up, looking genuinely offended. But after a lot of grumbling and dramatic sighs, she finally grabbed the knife and started chopping, though not without muttering under her breath about how unfair it all was. The house slowly came alive with activity, and honestly, I loved it. For the first time in years, I wasn't running around like a madwoman trying to do everything myself. The sound of my mom peeling potatoes, the kids clinking plates in the dining room, and even my sister's occasional grumbles felt like music to my ears. My brother complained about how long the turkey prep was taking, but I reminded him with a sweet smile that it was his turn to contribute. His wife kept asking for clarification on the pie recipe, clearly uncomfortable with baking from scratch, but she stuck with it. Even my mom, who always had something to say about my methods, was too busy peeling and chopping to offer more than a few critiques. And my sister, well, she took more breaks than anyone else, scrolling on her phone whenever she thought I wasn't looking, but every time I reminded her to get back to work, she sighed dramatically and did it. For the first time in years, I felt in control. Thanksgiving wasn't just on my shoulders. It was a shared effort, and the best part, I wasn't stressed. I wasn't exhausted or resentful. I was enjoying myself, watching my family realize for the first time just how much work went into making this holiday happen. When everything was finally ready, the house smelled amazing, and the table was beautifully set, not because I'd done it all, but because everyone had contributed. We sat down to eat, and for the first time in years, I actually enjoyed the meal. I wasn't exhausted, and I didn't feel resentful. I even caught myself smiling as my family laughed and talked, finally understanding just how much work went into the holiday they'd always taken for granted. After dinner, when everyone started to scatter, I made my next move. I told them that if they wanted dessert, they'd have to help clean up. The looks on their faces were priceless. My mom looked scandalized, my brother laughed like I was joking, and my sister flat out refused. But I didn't back down. I handed out dish towels and soap, and eventually, after some grumbling, they got to work. Watching my brother scrape plates and my sister wash wine glasses felt like poetic justice. For once, they were experiencing what I'd gone through every year. When everything was finally done, we sat down for dessert, and that's when the complaints started. My mom said she'd been expecting a real surprise and that she was disappointed the surprise was just work. My brother joked that he'd never seen a Thanksgiving like this before. My sister outright said, "If this is what Thanksgiving is going to be like, count me out next year." That's when I told them I didn't plan to host next year. The room went silent. My mom immediately said, "Well, who else is going to do it? You're the only one with the space." My sister claimed she wouldn't have the time, and my brother said his work schedule was too hectic. I told them that if they wanted me to host again, they'd have to help from start to finish, no complaints. Otherwise, they'd need to find someone else or skip the holiday altogether. No one knew how to respond. My sister looked irritated, my mom seemed shocked, and my brother just shrugged, but I didn't care. For the first time, I felt like I had taken back control of Thanksgiving, and honestly, it felt amazing.